As anti-Semitic and anti-Israel protests spread from Columbia University to major colleges across the country, President Biden did not step before the cameras. Instead, he tersely responded to a reporter's shouted question and was hard to hear.
Do you condemn the anti-Semitic protests on college campuses?
I condemn the anti-Semitic protests. That's why I've set up a program to deal with that. I also condemn those who don't understand what's going on with the Palestinians.
House Speaker Mike Johnson met with Jewish students at Columbia and called for its president, Minouche Shafik, to resign.
They place a target on the backs of Jewish students in the United States and here on this campus. A growing number of students have chanted in support of terrorists. They have chased down Jewish students. They have mocked them and reviled them.
After the NYPD arrested more than 100 pro-Palestinian protesters at Columbia last week, they set up the illegal tents again, and as we see there, and the school has been negotiating with them, switching to hybrid classes as most Jewish students have fled. There have been other arrests at other schools, including USC, we see there, which has canceled graduation, and the demonstrators have been harassing those who support Israel.
Never forget the 7th of October.
That will happen.
Never forget the 7th of October.
Not 1 more time. Not 5 more times. Not 10 more times. Not 100 more times. Not 1,000 more times.
No,
Not 10,000 times.
Joining us now from New York, Rich Lowry, editor-in-chief of National Review. And here with me, Shelby Talcott, a reporter for Semafor. Rich, why after last week's arrests at Columbia, where I went to journalism school, has the university just been unable to regain control after even pro-Gaza protesters, including some faculty members, were either demonstrating or setting up all of these tents in the middle of a private space at a private university?
Yeah, it's a real failure, Howie. It makes no sense, excuse me, to clear them out and then let them come right back. Either don't clear them out in the first place, which would have been the wrong thing to do, or clear them out and keep clearing them out. And clearly the president there, she just feels though she's caught betwixt and between, because there's the right thing to do, making them go, and there's what the faculty wants her to do, which is to let them stay. So she's just stuck in this horrible position. And look, I'm a free speech guy, but this isn't a free speech question, it's trespassing. And two, if you're in favor of free speech, that includes viewpoint neutrality. So there's no way in a million years, if these were white supremacist kids, hypothetically, that she'd be negotiating them. They would have been cleared out in 1 minute, never to come back to Columbia ever again. Yeah, I'm also for free speech and peaceful protest, but when you take over a chunk of a campus, we're talking here about a university that has basically surrendered, gone to hybrid classes for the rest of the semester. Most Jewish students have fled the school. Shelby, is the constant presence of TV cameras at places like Columbia helping to inflame the situation by drawing more anti-Israel protesters because they are seizing the moment to get attention?
Yeah, I think, and I covered all of the protests and riots back in 2020 on the ground extensively, and one of the things I noticed was, you know, there was this massive media focus, but for portions at a time. And I think in order to really accurately report on something like this, you have to have these, you know, you have to have cameras there from 5 o'clock in the afternoon when it's peaceful until 3 o'clock in the morning when oftentimes it becomes less peaceful. And so that's something that I'm seeing occur again this time around, where that's not happening. And if you talk to Biden officials, they've argued that the media is blowing this up into a bigger deal than it actually is. And they say that their internal, you know, polling and data suggests that young voters are concerned about this, but they're more concerned about other issues. Well, maybe you could argue that a couple weeks ago. Right now, I think this is the hottest issue in America, and I think that the tide is starting to turn with these arrests. Let me play a video. It's gotten a lot of attention by Columbia student Kamani Jones talking to Columbia officials, and here's what he said.
Zionists don't deserve to live. The same way we're very comfortable accepting that Nazis don't deserve to live. And so, yes, I feel very comfortable calling for those people to die.
It's Kamani James. I apologize for the error. And a Columbia statement says that this is extremely alarming and upsetting, and that calls of violence, depending on ethnicity or religion, et cetera, are unacceptable and violate university policy. Rich.
Yeah, shocking that one of the leaders of these student protests would be saying this sort of stuff on video. You know, he wants to kill Zionists. And part of that, Howie, was a private video after he had this interview with school officials about some violent things he had said. But a lot of it he said to one, or I believe two, Columbia officials. So why are we only learning about it now, or is it becoming an issue now? That doesn't make any sense either.
That's really a good point. Let me just stop you there. I mean, back in January, he said all these things. I didn't see any, you know, suspension or expulsion or outrage. But now that it's become public, suddenly Columbia is really worried about it. And there are lots of other people who agree with this guy.
Yeah, so again, if this is a white supremacist saying, I want to kill Zionists, he's gone the next day. But he's pro-Hamas and says he wants to kill Zionists, or is at least interested in the idea, and he's still there. And in terms of the images and the media coverage spreading this, I think that it's worked on both sides of the equation, Howie, because yes, it's created more protests all around the country. But the other thing is administrations have learned from what's happened at Columbia. And a lot of them, the lesson they're taking is clear it out immediately and be really forceful about it, and then the problem's taken care of. So that's why we've seen some really, like in Princeton, they cleared out the encampment, I think, in literally 5 minutes. Yeah, so you're saying there's basically a double standard when Jewish students are the target. I'll come back to you with that. But let me, you know, when I see some of these Jewish students interviewed, those who are still trying to go to campus, those who are not, you can just hear the pain and frustration. And here's a woman named Katie was interviewed on Fox who said that, you know, I watch videos of people being screamed at because people condone their rape and murder, as we saw from Kaimani James.
Yeah, and it's that sort of rhetoric that one of the things with that sort of rhetoric is that once one person says it, it becomes far easier for more people to say it. Again, as I saw in 2020 in very different circumstances, but the same thing. That sort of violent speech can spread quite quickly. And so understandably, Jewish students across the country are incredibly concerned and upset. And it's really unfortunate, right? It's ruining a lot of college experiences, not to mention it's dangerous.
Rich, you seem to say in something you've written that the anti-Semitic right gets criticized, but the anti-Semitic left gets a pass. I wonder if you would address that, and also the parallel you draw to the very violent 1968 anti-Vietnam War protests at Columbia.
Yeah, so Columbia has a history of this. Very notable protests in 1968. They were bigger. You know, these are really kind of small-scale actions. I think most places 100 students or less. Columbia, in '68, they took over 4 or 5 buildings and held an administrator hostage for at least 24 hours. Yeah. So not that position yet. But this double standard, I think, is very notable. I mean, Joe Biden said that he ran for president because of Charlottesville and because of Trump's supposed inadequate response. Now, I think he tells falsehoods about what Trump said in the wake of Charlottesville. But Charlottesville was horrible, and it was terrible, and there was a murder, and there were violent clashes. But even, you know, these these marchers with the tiki torches who, you know, didn't kill anyone. They were just menacing, right? And they're saying anti-Semitic slogans, and this was a national crisis. And I think the same standard should apply here.
Well, there were more arrests yesterday at even more schools, about 200. And let's look at some of the earlier footage. There were arrests at Yale, but I want to put up, which school is that? Okay, University of Texas at Austin. Governor Greg Abbott called out state troopers. We see that. And also at NYU a few days ago, a lot of the police came out and made these arrests. And this is why I say the tide is turning, because if they've done this right away, I think it might have come as a shock to the system. I think people now want some semblance of order returned to these college campuses. And, you know, I mentioned I went to Columbia. It's kind of more embarrassing to talk about now. But I think, again, that the tide is turning. Let me get a break. Joe Biden, Howard Stern, and the friendliest interview ever.
I'm Steve Doocy. I'm Brian Kilmeade.
And I'm Ainsley Earhart. And click here to subscribe to the Fox News YouTube page to catch our hottest interviews and most compelling analysis.